chapter number 6. Esther chapter number 6. As we've been studying through this book of Esther, it's a very unique book in the fact that this book does not mention God's name, nor does it mention prayer, and yet we see Israel here in this semi-state of captivity. Some of them have already been released to go home. They were Ezra and the party that left with him had gone to build the temple. And of course, you can read about that there in the book of Ezra. And then later on, you have the book of Nehemiah and Nehemiah going back to build the walls of Jerusalem. And so you've got this book kind of sandwiched between them here as it tells of this account, Satan's purpose, trying to destroy the promises of God, trying to stop the coming of Messiah. He has always been after God's people to destroy them, to find some way. And this is one of those places where this was he tried to bring that to pass by this man named Haman. As we've already studied so far in these first 5 chapters here, Haman, he hates Mordecai particularly, and he finds out Mordecai is a Jew because Mordecai refused to bow the knee to Haman. And so he uses that opportunity not only to kill Mordecai, but also to kill the children of Israel. And so he has the king to make a decree that this people be destroyed. And the king here, God had already worked in his providence on behalf of the people to place Esther as queen of all of that world empire and put her in the king's ear there, that she would have audience with him. And then, of course, Mordecai, after this decree was signed, Mordecai sending Esther to the king, and Esther asked for fasting to be made for her for those 3 days before she would go to the king, and hopes that the king would extend his golden scepter to her in order for her to have audience with the king, because only those that were called by the king were permitted to come into his presence. And if you came in without being called and that scepter was not extended to you, you would be killed. And so she goes in, and the king, of course, receives her, extends the scepter to her, and she's given audience with the king. Her request to the king was, and he said, whatever it is, up to half the kingdom, she could have it. And her request is that he would simply come, him and Haman come to a banquet that she had prepared for them. And they come to the banquet, but she still didn't have the confidence or the courage to ask what she was going to ask. And so she asked that another banquet be made the next day, and the king and Haman come to it. So Haman's pretty full of himself, and he's thinking pretty highly, and he's so exalted in himself that he don't want to wait for that year to pass before Mordecai is killed, because as he's coming out of this banquet with the king, he comes face to face with Mordecai, and Mordecai once again does not bow before him or give him obeisance, and so that just makes Haman angry. He goes home and seeks the advice of his family and his wise men, and they tell him, well, just build you a scaffolding, and you just hang Mordecai on the scaffolding. And so there at his house, he builds this 75-foot tall scaffold to hang Mordecai on. This all before this second banquet that's about to take place. We come to chapter 6, and this is kind of a fun chapter, these next 2, because this is where we see the providence of God truly working on behalf of Mordecai. And I think this is, you can see a little bit of the humor of God because Haman had built this 75-foot scaffold to hang Mordecai on. And then he's gone to the king to get permission to hang Mordecai immediately. But we come to chapter 6, and it says here, on that night could not the king sleep. God has a way of getting hold of people, even when they do not know him. He has ways that he can minister, he can speak to, he can open the hearts of. He has all under his control. He is absolutely sovereign over everyone that lives upon this earth, and he has complete control over them. And so this is the case with the king here. He could not sleep, and so he needed some way to count sheep. And so his counting of sheep was to have somebody come and bring the record book, the records of the Chronicles, and read them before the king. He thought, I'll get this boring stuff, and they'll come read these Chronicles, and it'll put me right back to sleep. And so it was found written. They come bringing the Chronicles there to read before the king, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? And said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there's nothing done for him. And so as he is reading these Chronicles, or having the Chronicles read to him, they come across the record of where Mordecai had warned the king about these two chamberlains that was there in the king's house that had a conspiracy to kill the king. Mordecai found out about that, of course, told Esther, told to the king, and that being told to the king, then these two were found out, and they were killed because of their rebellion against the king, but nothing had been done for Mordecai. Nobody had rewarded him in any way, even though his name was recorded in that record there. Nobody had done anything for him. And so he says there in verse 3, the king said, verse 3, what honor has been done? And then said the king's servants that ministered, there's nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. I mean, Haman wanted to do this so badly. He was there in the king's court first thing that morning. He wanted so badly to get rid of Mordecai. He wanted so badly to kill him that he was there first thing in the morning to ask the king's permission to hang Mordecai on those gallows. And just before he gets there, the king reads about how Mordecai had saved his life. And what can I do to honor this Mordecai? I mean, the timing. You can't beat God's timing there, right? I mean, it's here Mordecai is coming in to get permission to hang, or Haman rather coming in to get permission to hang Mordecai, and God working on the king's heart there to reward Mordecai in the same instant here. And of course, old Haman comes in. He's still angry at Mordecai, and he's wanting this to happen right away. And so the king's servant, verse number 5, the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done? What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Pride goeth before the fall. The scripture tells us that, does it not? And here Haman can't imagine anybody else in the kingdom that was worthy of such praise more than himself. And so he thinks, well, the king's talking about me. The king's talking about honoring me, talking about doing good for me. And so the king asked him, what should be done? To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth on, he says, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal, which is set upon his head. So he's saying, let this guy wear the king's clothes and ride the king's horse and have the king's crown put upon him. And let him be brought out and have a parade through town so that everybody can see. Let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal, whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Now, Haman thinks this is what's going to be done to him. This is the reason he's went to such extravagances. He thinks the king's asking him because he's wanting to do this for Haman. And so Haman's laying it on thick. Why? The best. I mean, ticker tape parade stuff. The floats, the balloons, everything. I mean, you just go all out, marching bands. You parade this guy through the street wearing the king's garment, riding the king's horse with the king's crown upon his head. All the best should be done for this guy. Verse 10 says, then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. Do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Can't you just see the look on Haman's face when the king said that? When he said, go do these things to Mordecai. He liked the idea so much, commanded it to be immediately done. And here, Haman took the apparel, it says in verse 11, and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. I can imagine his proclamations there were pretty half-hearted as he's going through the city, proclaiming this pronouncement of the king's honor upon Mordecai. But he's charged with doing this. Here he is. He's gone to seek permission of the king to hang this man, and now he's parading him through the streets. And declaring the king's honor upon him. This is all the hand of the Lord. Even to this people that have not spoke his name, that have not called upon him, who, as far as we know, had all but forgotten him. And yet God, faithful to his promises, is going to his people, is using this people that had forgotten him to accomplish his faithfulness, to keep that promise that he had given to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. The promise that he'd even given unto us. He's faithful to keep those, and he's using his people to accomplish that for him. And so here Haman is conducting this parade. In verse 12 it says, and Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered. Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends, everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. They understood the signs of the time there, that this is not good, Haman. This is not good. This is the one you hated so much. This is the people you desired to destroy, and now the king is honoring him above you. This is not good for you. This is going to come out bad on your end. And so while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains. Now remember, he's supposed to go back to meet with the king that day to eat this second feast that Esther has prepared for them. And so he is, he's gone that morning. He is pumped up in himself, thinking he is of the highest honor before the king, of the highest honor even before the queen. But that Mordecai, he's got to rid himself of Mordecai. And so he goes that morning to seek the king to go ahead and hang Mordecai, to get rid of him. Didn't want to have to put up with him any longer. He was stealing his joy. He was stealing that honor that he wanted, and he desired so bad to get rid of that Mordecai. And so here he is. He's gone to seek the king about destroying Mordecai, and here he is now honoring Mordecai, parading him through the streets. He goes home. His family, his counselors tell him, no, that's not good. You're in a bad way here now, because the king has honored this very one whom you're seeking to destroy. And while they're yet telling him this, in comes the king's chamberlains. Hey, you got to go. It's time for you to go to meet the king and the queen for this second banquet. And so here he is now, coming once again before the king, to come in for this time of banquet. He didn't even have a chance to think about it, what needed to be his next step. He didn't have a chance to even mill over what his wife and his counselors were telling him. He was already being carried back to the palace. It says, so the king, verse 1 of chapter 7, so the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. Now, can't you just see the turmoil on Haman's face? He's not even able to enjoy this banquet that he was looking at before as this great honor. Here he is being brought in this time, and he's still distressed from all the stuff that's happened to him before. He's not even able to enjoy that. No doubt he's still going over in his mind, how did this all happen? That here Mordecai, I'm leading Mordecai around, and he's received all this honor, and he's received all this glory today. And how is this going to pan out today? What is my next step? What is it that I need to do? And you can see he's struggling with this as he comes in before the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. And so Esther here, she has the courage now to ask this very thing. This is what Mordecai had told her in chapter 4, that for such a time as this. How do we know that for such a time as this, you've been placed in this position in the kingdom to intercede on behalf of your people? This is how God was going to accomplish this. And Mordecai warns her, said, look, if you don't stand up If you don't stand up and speak this to the king, if you don't intercede on behalf of your people, don't think that you and I are going to escape. We're both going to be killed. We're going to be the first ones. God will raise up deliverance someplace else, because he understood that the promises of God to the people of Israel, even though he didn't mention God's name, he understood that the promises of God would be held true, that God was going to defend his people, that he was going to bring deliverance to them. They had not forgotten that. He said, deliverance will arise from someplace else for the Jews, but you and I won't escape. They were too close to the command of it being given, and so he knew they would not escape. And he says, who knows that for such a time as this, you would be able to intercede for the people. And here she is. She's the one that's interceding, and she does so now. She intercedes for them and for herself, and she tells the king, let me live and let my people live, because there's somebody out to get us. There's somebody trying to kill us. Verse 5, it says, then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he? And where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? Now here, Haman's already perplexed. I mean, he's already beside himself. What am I going to do? How am I going to fix this problem? How is it that I'm going to be able to overcome this reality? And Mordecai has received such an honor, and now the queen's pointing the finger at him and saying, this guy right here is trying to kill me and my people. And so he says there, the king says, who is this? Who does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So she points him right out. The king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. The king's so angry he couldn't even handle the situation in the moment. The anger just welled over him, that he gets up from his table and goes out into the garden overwhelmed in his anger, and Haman is now scrambling for mercy. It says, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So here, Haman's begging for his life. He falls down on the couch that Esther was sitting upon there to eat, and the king comes in, says, trying to force himself on the queen, and in his anger yet, of course, and they cover Haman's face. That's not a good place to be in right there. He was in the highest position of honor the day before, and now he's having his face covered, and he's being carried out from the presence of the king. Harbonah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold, also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So his own gallows that he had built to hang Mordecai on was used to execute Haman. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So Haman's day really turned sour fast. God protecting his people, even though they did not fully understand or had even forgotten God in his promises to them, had brought this protection. And there's further yet that goes on here in order for that protection to be accomplished, that the king would have to set in order, because in the next chapter there, in chapter 8, we find out that the law of the Medes and the Persians cannot be changed. And so he had to have a workaround in order to protect Esther and the children of the Jews there, because of the law that was signed. But Haman is the one that catches the blame. Haman is the one who had established all of this, but ultimately it was the king's responsibility. He's the one that signed this law into being. All he saw was the dollar signs, and saw that was going to be good for him economically, and so he signed that law into place by Haman's behest. But nevertheless, Haman here has suffered this death because of his hatred for Mordecai and for the Jews. And this protection will come for them, as was hoped by Mordecai, as was accomplished by Esther, as she brings this intercession on behalf of the children of the Jews there. And so this plot of Haman here is overturned. It's overturned, at least toward Mordecai at this point, and it will be for all of Israel in the next 2 chapters, as the Lord will provide that deliverance once again for them, not only in Shushan, the palace, but throughout all of the kingdom of Persia. Would this protection be given, that God's people would be protected from this wicked law that was signed into place. There, even when God's people here had forgotten God, even when they were not calling upon him, even yet God's promise to them remained sure. It remained faithful. And he kept those promises to them. And he still, even though they had forgotten him, it seems, he had not forgotten his promises. And he intercedes on behalf of them to bring about this deliverance, because God is always faithful. No matter what trials may come our way, no matter what wickedness may appear in this world, God is faithful to his promises for his people. There is nothing that can take us from him. There is nothing that can remove or soil or spoil his promises that he has given to us. God's word remains true. He remains faithful no matter what may come. He still rules all of his creation, no matter who may sit upon the kingly throne, no matter what empire may be ruling over. God is still the one in control. He's the one that raises up kings. He is the one who brings those kings down. He is the one who establishes those nations, and he is the one that tears those nations down. He is the one that is in absolute control, even when his people have forgotten him. He remains in control, and he fulfills his promises to his people. Next time we'll look there in chapter 8 and chapter 9, as we see God's or the workaround here that God provides for them in order for the Jews to be protected. And you have an establishment of a new feast for Israel. It's not one that's listed in Leviticus 23. It's a new one called Purim. And in fact, you find the Lord celebrating that feast even during his ministry. It's when it starts, is in this deliverance of the Jews once more by the um, petition or the intercession of Esther, the queen. All right, let's all stand. We'll be dismissed.